Most podcasters don't grow because they don't have a strategy. No more. Welcome to the show, Podcast to Grow, where I help coaches and entrepreneurs turn their podcast into their most powerful business tool. I'm Elena, and I'm breaking down exactly how to get more listeners, more impact, and more sales. Let's get into it. If you've ever felt like your podcast is plateauing or you're just not seeing the results you wanted to see, but you're doing all of the things, like you're recording, you're promoting, you are publishing, but you're not seeing the steady growth, then this episode is exactly what you should be listening to. I'm going to show you how to close those growth gaps that you're having with your podcast. And that's without being in one of my programs or working one-on-one with me. And I'm going to help you do that through this 5-part series that I'm calling the Power Podcast series. And we are going to take you from overwhelmed to knowing exactly what you should be doing throughout these 5 episodes. And they are going to help you. I see a lot of misconceptions in podcasting, and the one that every podcaster comes to realize is that consistency isn't enough. It is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to your podcast. So let's talk about the strategy gaps and how to close them for your podcast today. When I got started in the podcasting industry working with podcasters, I thought showing up weekly was the goal. But looking at my clients, to be fair, they were doing just that. They were consistent, passionate, and they were putting in the hours. But whenever I looked at the back end, I didn't see the correlation with the growth, the leads, and the conversation. It just didn't match the effort that they were putting in. Working with more than a dozen shows, I started seeing the patterns over and over again. And more importantly, I saw the gaps. Not in the talent, not in the passion, but in the strategy. That's when the shift started for me. They were creating solid content, but it wasn't leading into growth, leads, or opportunities. Their shows had so much potential, but they had no clear direction, no growth system, and no feedback loop. And without any of those things, their podcast couldn't move forward or do what they wanted it to do for their business because they were not making those connections. And knowing that they couldn't make the connection, I started to see that that was the missing part. It wasn't about the effort. It was about knowing how to strategically move forward. So I started testing formulas like structuring episodes more strategically, playing around with SEO and designing some guesting approaches, and mapping goals to content. And that's when things started to really shift for my clients and fast. Okay, so here's why most podcasters will stay stuck and stay where they are, because they won't take the time to listen to a podcast like this or find that support from a podcast coach. So they just stay stuck where they are, thinking that they'll stay busy with whatever else they're doing in their business and they can keep their podcast on the back burner because, hey, it's gaining listeners anyway, so why do I need to focus on it? I'm getting a few downloads a week. It's fine. But here's the thing. Your podcast has so much potential for you and your business. It can do so much. And momentum is the number one thing that it can do for your business. Most podcasters will ignore totally that they have a strategy problem. So let's talk about the common patterns that I see in the strategy gaps. Number one is creating content without having any kind of call to action. You have a podcast and you're not giving your listeners the next step that they should be taking. The next is guesting for exposure and not thinking about the continuous conversation that can happen You can be networking. You are also able to gain a whole new audience. How do you capture them? How do you bring them over to what you're doing? These are the things that you might be missing. Completely ignoring SEO for titles and episodes descriptions, these two places can give you so much visibility and help the right listeners find your show without having to do any other kind of extra work. Oh, and this one, publishing for consistency and not even thinking about, are these podcast episodes working for me? Are they doing anything for me and my business? You haven't taken the time to look at the back end and see how your episodes are doing, what kind of topics are doing better, how to analyze any of that data. You're not looking at any of it, and you're just publishing just to publish content. Without strategy for your podcast just becomes another content treadmill, and that is how you burn out fast. Just like social media, you just keep going and going, and that leads to burnout, and you get sick of it. And that's why so many people have started podcasts and have quit, because of the burnout. It feels like too much. So I want to show you some ways to podcast without those burnouts. When you don't have strategy, you can feel very lost. And that is why I created most of my systems and methods to help with audience engagement, with retention, with every piece of your podcast that can feel like it's slipping or you don't quite understand what is going on around it. The analytics, the way that your podcast shows up in searches, all of that. And that is why I built my membership, Podstar. And that is to help you grow your podcast from whatever point you're at. Maybe you're at a point where your podcast is ready for sponsorships or you're ready to do some brand deals. I could help you there. Maybe your podcast is just starting out and you want to launch your podcast, but you want to do it so that you can make sure that you are set up to be able to monetize as soon as possible with your podcast. Or maybe you have a podcast, you launched it maybe in 2020 when a lot of people launched a podcast, and you have kind of played with it here and there. You've maybe ghosted it. Maybe you've come back and it still didn't give you the results that you wanted. So you're just like, I'm not getting anywhere. I can help you out. Let me tell you a little bit about what Podstar is. Podstar isn't just a membership. It's a strategy-first podcast community, plus membership for podcasters who want to grow on purpose. And what you get inside of Podstar is monthly coaching hot seat calls with me. You get plug and play templates that will have you feeling like a pro and not guessing at all anymore. You're getting real feedback on your show. Think mini audits for your show, and a community that gets it. They're exactly where you are, and they're here to do the same as you are to grow your podcast. Also, I have expert workshops, one about podcast guesting and another one about podcast SEO. Podstar isn't just another hack membership that won't give you anything or give you a bunch of jargon and you'll walk away not knowing what to do next. It's for sustainable growth, and it's for podcasters who actually want their show to grow like a brand. Let me tell you what that exactly looks like. One of my podcast clients came to me and she had a show that wasn't converting, or she wasn't seeing any traction from her show. She was seeing traction from other things that she was doing on maybe social media or masterclasses that she had, but nothing was directly showing her that her podcast was converting. And she was publishing consistently, but just feeling like why did she even have a podcast, right? In her first session with me, we went over her messaging and how to improve it. What was happening was she was talking more like she was speaking to her peers in her podcast than she was to potential clients. And so we had to switch a few things for her to sound like she was actually trying to help someone get that transformation within her podcast. She had the right building blocks, but she didn't have the right direction. So we just needed to tweak a few things. We realigned her show pillars to speak directly to her audience's pain points and decisions that they needed to shift before they would work with her. Then we applied part of my 12 method framework to her podcast. And then we created a 4-part podcast series that helped her dismantle her ideal client's objections in real time. Each episode tackled a mindset or a behavior block that often stopped people from investing in her offers. We added in conversational CTAs, so it didn't feel like a salesy pitch. It felt like a part of the conversation. And she layered in short reflections to help reinforce on each episode the next steps that would need to be taken. Within 30 days, she saw a spike in DMs from people wanting to talk to her. She also saw a flood of people coming in asking her to guest on other shows. And she was able to book a couple of clients from those episodes. So that's how I know this framework helps and can get you to the next step that you might be looking for with your podcast. Because her podcast became an actual touch point in her client's journey. It wasn't just there for content purposes. It was there to help someone make a decision to work with her. And that's just one of the transformations that I've seen working with my clients and in the membership. And I just want to give you one more example that will bring this home for you. I had a member in the membership and she was constantly podcasting, right? But she just didn't know how her podcast even correlated with her business at all. She loved talking about spicy topics and just giving her overall what's going on in her life and all the other fun stuff that can feel like you're podcasting and that you're actually, talking about stuff. And what you're actually doing is just speaking into the void. It's more of a passion project at that point. So if you are looking to podcast for your business, we have to do it a little bit more strategically than just having fun episodes. Yes, those episodes are so great for character building, but we can add those in and also be strategic at the same time. And again, I was identifying what was wrong with her podcast to help her get to the next step. And what we saw was that she was talking a little bit about her business, but she was also really talking a lot about herself and her thoughts. And what we just needed to do is just shift it just a little bit to talk about her thoughts, but based on what kind of transformations she has brought to her clients. And so again, we created a nice 5-part series that helped do that for our clients and showed them how she actually takes someone through her framework and how it actually works for them. And we also added more strategic call to actions so that her podcast actually led to an action after they listened, which was to book a call with her. And she did see an increase in calls booked. And she was super excited to see that because she didn't see the correlation. And also her audience didn't see the correlation between what she was talking about and her business. And therefore that shows you just those little small tweaks can be what needs to happen for your podcast to actually get to the next level. I also could tell based on what she was telling me that she needed to go and find more aligned audience. And so I told her that maybe a guesting strategy was the next step for her. So what we did was I told her about some aligned podcast spots that she might be interested in. And she was able to meet new podcasters and gain new audiences and followings from those people and from those podcasts that she was on. So in all, this is important to make sure that your strategy is not just one step, but maybe it's 2 or 3 steps ahead so that you are ready to make that momentum happen for your podcast. And those are the things that happen inside of Podstar when you apply a strategy to your podcast. And I hope that today's episode has helped you make some of those tweaks happen. But if not, please go back to my season 1 of this podcast to Grow, and listen to those episodes. I go so much deeper on each of these. I talk about visibility. I talk about a little mini audit that you can do. I also talk about retention with your podcast and how to improve the retention. So in all, I have a wealth of knowledge to give, and I just want to help all podcasters do even better. I want to tell you about the other episodes that are coming up in this series. I have a great one with Candace. She is a podcast guesting expert. She has a workshop inside my membership, and she has a wealth of knowledge, and the conversation was so awesome. She got me excited about podcast guesting again, and it was awesome. Also, I spoke with my friend, Sonia, and she is an SEO genius, and I love talking to her, and I love talking about podcasting and SEO. And so we had a great convo that's going to help your titles and podcast description be seen by way more of your ideal clients. So listen to that episode. And also, I have an episode coming up with my strategy client who will tell you all about what we did and the strategies that I gave her, and hear it from her mouth instead of just mine about how amazing it was to see podcast growth actually happen in real time. And I will wrap up the series with a fall strategy plan that will help you to see even more results from your podcast. If you're ready to stop winging your podcast and actually get results that you've been dreaming of, you need to join Podstar today. This is the moment you shift from guessing to growing. You can join now and get $40 off your first month inside of Podstar. Go and click the link and get in Podstar right now. It is an amazing place to be, and you will be flowing with strategy to help your podcast grow with purpose. That's a wrap for today. If you loved this episode, let's keep the momentum going. Leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more coaches and entrepreneurs find podcasts to grow, and I really appreciate you being here with me. And if you're ready to grow your podcast strategically, join us inside Become a Podstar today, my membership where I help you turn your podcast into your most valuable business tool. Head to the link in the episode description or DM me, Podstar, on Instagram at Vibe and Voice Media. That is VIBNVOICEMEDIA to get all the details. Can't wait to chat with you. Hit follow, and I'll see you next week.